Oh, would you look at that? An extremely nice and inspirational character who adopted two very lost, innocent children. I sure hope nothing bad happens to him. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do mean to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. So, another fun fact, we are here for Chapter 8 of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, which is known as Dura wa Bobidi Mechika, Part 1. And obviously, now knowing after recording a 20-minute live reaction, or 28-minute live reaction, that thing ended up, as always. Maybe it's because I read through the full chapter. It's because I read through the full chapter for the first time, so obviously it takes a while. But if you want to check out the 28-minute live reaction to this chapter, you become a patron for as little as $1 a month, or you become a member on the channel for as little as $3 a month. You can get full access to this live reaction, every other live reaction I do for the series. But with that being the case, now knowing who Dura is, Dura wa Bobidi Mechika, yeah, this guy, he's he's definitely covered. We know he's gonna perish because he's the only Samurian that is named. Well, no, not the only Samurian that is named that we haven't seen, because we do get some more named Samurians in this chapter, or named Rumelians as we get further context for in the chapter. But it is named after him, and he's the one who built the canal, and considering what happens at the end of this chapter, something tells me he's going to be the one punished. So we shall see. However, let's hop right into Chapter 8 of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, Dura wa Bobidi Mechika, Part 1. The village where my brother and I grew up was razed by the government. Our parents resisted until the very end, only to be crushed into the rubble of our home. As my father died, he was clutching what I thought was just an ordinary rock, like it was the most precious thing in the world. But even now, I sometimes wonder if it was really nothing more than that. So, this is presumably, this whole flashback, I suppose, will be Cross finally being honest with Yuka and explaining their history, explaining why he feels the way he does. And I'm perfectly down with that. Notably, I do want Sumerian backstory. This is supposed to be a short run series. It isn't actually supposed to be very, very long. I think it's only supposed to be, 3 volumes? I think maybe 30-ish chapters. So us being 8 chapters deep and getting straight into the Sumerian backstory makes perfect sense. Getting into Cross and Mara's backstory specifically also makes sense, and the way it's being presented works really, really well, considering we just don't know enough about Sumerian culture and history and stuff like that. So it is good to learn it finally. Now, the idea that their parents were slain by the government, not just their parents, the village where his brother and where my brother and I grew up, so obviously this is Cross and Maru grew up, was raised by the government. That's an interesting opener, because it's presumable that their village was destroyed by Deskunte. Deskunte is essentially another group of Samurians, the ones notably with horns. We've met, at least by this chapter, we met 2 types of Samurians. Later on, we're going to further dive into the Rumelians and their culture. I'm not sure if I'm saying any of these names right, but I'm doing my best. But the Rumelians and their culture, very specifically, and beings that protect them specifically, and we shall see a glimpse of the Deskunte. Notably, Dabura, who is commonly believed to be the Sumerian king, is a Deskunte. Meanwhile, Jabaloma, Cross, Maru, and every other character we see in this chapter that gets a name are all Rumelians. But it is interesting that the Deskunte, presumably the government, came in and destroyed their home. And we will find out later what this will probably end up being an allegory for in some way, shape, and or form, because Gege is once again pulling the Toby Fox approach of saying, y'all didn't get the themes of the last series, no problem, themes.text, and hitting enter. But we see that a certain someone is being tasked with taking care of children. I wonder who that could be. Could it be the titular character of this chapter? As they say, no way, I don't want to take care of no kid. And we see an older gentleman saying, please, Dura, you need to become a daddy. You're too handsome not to be. And Dura says, if they got captured, then so be it. Just punish them and send them back home. And we see the older gentleman say, that's the problem. If you punish one child from the camp publicly, soon the jail will be overfilling with children. It's not unusual for starving children to work as thieves, after all. And that is true, right? Ultimately, we are getting context for the Rumelians in their situation, and it's obvious that there are a lot of orphans, or at least a lot of children who simply do not have the familial resources, or even possibly family at all, to maintain, regular healthy living conditions. They're in such a bad state that they are all reduced to be thieves, and thusly, in order to prevent the jail from overflowing with thief children, they're not going to do that. And very specifically, this older gentleman, who never actually gets a name, I'm pretty sure, this chapter. is the one who essentially introduces these two children to Dura. And we see that ultimately Dura says, punishing them officially is a lot more decent than letting vigilante justice run rampant. Essentially what Dura is saying, we might as well just get it out of the way properly, instead of having someone, and we will actually see a little bit of vigilante justice later on in this chapter, someone brutalize these kids instead, right? If it's going to be anybody, it might as well be the officials who control stuff, so the kids don't just get beat on for robbing other people. And we see that the older Samurian, or the older Rumelian, says, maybe, but they're no ordinary children. Even a grown man would have trouble taking them on. Which is a very interesting statement. One that does kind of get corroborated later on in this chapter, and does sort of build into the interesting nature of the two Romulians that we follow, right? As we see that the older gentleman says, if we send them back to camp, the residents there won't be satisfied unless we cut off at least one of their arms. So, that is interesting, right? The idea that it would be customary in their culture not only to viciously punish children, right? Dura doesn't even bat an eye at publicly, officially punishing them and then possibly throwing them in jail. But on top of that, limb removal of children is just possible, right? Like, no one would bat an eye at these two clear. Like, I don't think Maru and Cross, who this is obviously are, look at Maru, look at Cross, obviously these two are probably no older than 10 at this point, whatever the Samurian equivalent to 10 is. They're very, very young, and removing one of their limbs, even though they are children, that seems pretty extreme in our culture, though I know there could be some cultures that do enforce something like that on Earth. But notably, juvie is a thing for child offenders, but not arm removal. Limb removal simply is not a thing, especially for something as petty as thievery and or even some form of violence, even if the child is exceptionally strong. But we see that Dura ultimately decides, fine, whatever. Fine then. Or, fine then. And he meets Maru and Cross. Notably, this is one of the angriest times we've ever seen Maru while he's conscious. We've seen him angry when he's unconscious, but he is genuinely locked in here. And you can see that these two had definitely been roughhousing to the point where they needed to be put in this scenario, as they are both already battle damaged. But they are battle damaged, but not necessarily knocked out, and they both do stand defiant against Dura. Third Eye is fully out. It's clear that Third Eye is not particularly unique in Samurian culture, but obviously levels of strength vary, considering the kids are special for their raw physical strength, as even an adult, even a grown man would have trouble taking them on. Which admittedly implies a double effort, but still, hey, you think of how many 9-year-olds you think would whoop you? It's just two random 9-year-olds if they were to beat you if you are a full-grown adult. But with it being the case, we see that Dora's like, hey, there's two of them. And notably, this panel right here does imply that they actually were in jail. Like, they were actually really locked up, but the old man, possibly the warden or something, is letting them out to come be with Dura. And we see that the old man says, yes, they're twins. I said they, remember? And did he? If they got captured. Oh, yeah. Please, Dura, I don't want to take care of no kid. Please, Dura. There's a problem. You punish one child publicly. Children, these, us, they're all, maybe. But they are no children. If we send them, plural back to camp. But we see, as Dura is distracted by the older gentleman being like, so they, remember? We see that Maru in particular takes the offensive and lunges in openly. Dura completely negates this offense, though, completely just one-hand palming the dual punches and even the kick for Maru with no issue. Then Maru gets his wrist snapped up as Cross grabs something from the ground, I'm not even sure what it is, and goes to beam Dura in the back of the dome piece. Dura very specifically reminds me of... I'll admit, he reminds me of Rengoku in terms of his characterization, but hair-wise, he actually reminds me of Super Saiyan 3, but I'm thinking of another character. It's not Rengoku, and it's not Super Saiyan 3. Dura's hair is giving me vibes of something. My brain is screaming Acnologia, but I haven't read Fairy Tail. It's just because on stream, fun fact, I do stream every Friday at 8, and I want to try to stream more, but every Friday at 8, I do the streaming over on Twitch, that guy with the controls, so go check that out, link in the description down below. We talk about literally anything over there, so if you ever want to ask me any questions and expect an immediate response, voiced and everything, go over there. But the hair is reminding me of something. I think Agnologia is coming to mind because we were talking about fairy tale scaling, but I'm trying to remember why. Like, something about his hair and his design is screaming at me. My brain is saying, like, is it Xemnas or Ansem? But it's too spiky for that. So there's some character that Dura reminds me of. From his jawline, the only unique details from his character that don't trigger anything are his ears, which also does have, like, the weird multi-ear thing that I guess Yuji just draws ears weird, like this multi-ear thing. And notably, Dura does have pointed ears, which is a trait that does seem to be unique to him. Like, let me see this older gentleman's ears. I mean, they may be pointed. Maybe it's just like an older Rumelian thing that their ears become pointed as they age. But hold on, sorry, I know I'm skipping late into the chapter move, but I'm trying to see if any of the other Rumelians we see have pointed ears. Nope, they have regular ears. He has the like butterfly ear that we see Jabaloma have. This guy's ears are covered up, so we can't tell. I'm pretty sure Jabaloma, he has the extended ears, but yeah, he has regular shaped ears. They're just weighed down by the spreaders. Yeah, I think Yuji just draws ears weird. I'd have to go check like the human character's ears. Something about the way that Yuji draws ears catch me off guard. But it is notable. Yeah, even the Kuntai have like regular ears from the ones we see. It's only Dura who has the pointed ears. And I think, does Dabura also have pointed? Let me check something real quick. Hold on. Sorry, I know I'm doing a whole lot over this ears thing, but I do want to see something, because notably I had made a point in the live reaction I think may technically be a little bit different. Let's see, that's Dabura, but I can't see the tips of. Oh, actually, wait, no, I can go to chapter 6, right? Yeah, I think I should be able to go to chapter 6. Because Cross makes the note of having Dabura. Yeah, so Dabura doesn't even have the pointed ears. He does have the still weirdly drawn ears. Yeah, it's I don't know why. The ears just look really unnatural to me. I guess that is kind of how ears are designed. Let me see. Hey, hold on, sorry. I need to look at your ears real quick. We're talking. Let me see your ears. Maybe it's just Yuji Sensei's art style. Because I literally don't know why the ears are catching me so off guard. I think it's because there's so many holes in them. See, the ears are covered there. The ears are from a front view here. Ears are from a front view. Ears are from a front view. No, the ears look normal there. So maybe this is just a unique design thing for the ears. Usually Osaka Sensei is a fantastic artist, so I wouldn't be shocked if just occasionally the ear thing is that. But it is notable that Dura, since we are looking for whatever little phenotypical differences we can have between all the Samurians and specifically the Rumelians and the Skunte, the pointed ears of Dura are unique. I wonder if that's meant to signify something. Like, is he a mutated, or is that a thing that will develop for some Samurians as they get older, some Rumelians as they get older? Because he clearly seems to be Rumelian himself. And notably, as Cross goes in for the backswing on the back of Dura's head, I still don't know what character I'm thinking of that Dura reminds me of. No, it's not Sinbad Brain. It may be a Magi character, though. It may be a Magi character. It probably is a Magi character. I'm trying to think of a Magi character that has Dura's hairstyle and jawline. It's not Mar. Like, it's not Masura. It's not that. I need to think. But regardless, we see Maru gets gripped up, and as Cross lunges in for an attack, he doesn't even get a single hit blocked, as he immediately gets slammed into the wall, as Dura quickly humbles both of the young Rumelians, who are very clearly rebellious, and they have lost their parents, though, and lost any sense of self. So, naturally, I do not blame the two for being violent, but obviously Dura does not have any time for this, and just completely diffs the both of them, and knocks them both out, seemingly. And I do love the little detail of, since they are three-eyed beings, where typically the swirly eyes would only be on the main eyes, even their third eyes have the little swirly pattern in them, and they're both knocked out. But we see the Dura admits, well, at least you got a lot of energy. Perfect. You can help me with my work. You don't get paid though. So obviously this is Dura essentially adopting the two, right? He's not paying them, but I don't know about y'all. If y'all had any sort of father figure, I mean, I'm trying to think. Neither of my mothers, and by mothers I mean like my mom or my grandmother. Like, neither of them ever were like, child, awaken. It is time for 12 hours of intense manual labor. Yes, it is before dawn. No, we will not finish until after dawn. We shall work forever together. Like, it's only been either of my fathers that would do that. Like, my own dad would wake me up and be like, child, we must till the entire yard and prepare it for the winter. And we would literally wake up before dawn and then work throughout the entire end of the summer to prepare it for winter. But I still remember my grandfather woke me up one day and said, grandson of mine, we must switch out the entire roof on the shed. I was like, the entire roof? He said, my knees are bad, grandchild. I will quickly show you how to do it and you shall help me. And that was like another whole day task. And obviously, didn't get paid for that. Also, I did have a roof over my head and a home and loving parents. So obviously, this is Dura essentially adopting the two of them. And saying they won't get paid, but they will get a happy life and father figure. Oh, I sure do hope nothing happens to make Cross extremely distrustful due to a loss of another father figure, considering their original parents were literally slain by the government. But with it being the case, we have to reveal that I'm building a canal. And we see that Dura admits, I'm gonna keep digging. Take those rocks and fill the cages lined up over there with them. Like that. And we see both Maru and Cross are very quickly amenable to the orders and go, got it! And we see that Dura says, but don't touch those rocks over there. And they'll say, yes, sir! And immediately get to work on gathering the rocks and moving them. And we see that the older gentleman from before says, I can't believe those are the same naughty children. I made the right decision asking you to take them in, Dura. And obviously take them in. He adopted them. And we see that Dura admits, I just had to rough them up a couple times. After that, they listen pretty good. And as an individual who was once a rowdy child, if you couldn't tell, I feel like there are many things just by like how I speak and how I record and how I make my own videos out. You can probably tell a whole lot about me and my history just by how I act. I was also a rowdy little numbnut very, very, very often in my youth. And notably, there were many times where I also had to be humbled by my elders. Obviously, I was lucky enough to be born with and grow up with my birth parents. But whenever they would leave me with anybody, I was a rowdy little kid. And thusly, I did need to be humbled many a time over. And that would be physically. Not in any bad way. Typically, it would just be like one of my older cousins who was left to babysit me, just grabbing me, not by the scruff of my neck, because obviously I'm not like a cat. I didn't have a scruff of the neck. But they'll like lift me up by my shirt and shake me a little bit and be like, stop! And notably, I, like many other children, will fold very quickly to any sort of display of extreme strength, as something subconscious, even though I barely understood what strength truly meant at that age, was like, oh, I have no power. And very specifically, it's this moment here that I can at least somewhat link back to, obviously not to the same scale though, as we see that both Maru and Cross were still rebelling a whole lot, and Dura says, you kids don't learn, do you? Or you're just that bored? I thought I gave you a job. But suddenly, as they recover from getting absolutely brutalized again, we see that Dura says, oh, this one's bigger than I thought it'd be. Now that's a big boulder. Stand back, you two. And both look on and watch as Dura immediately pulverizes the boulder. And they both watch in awe as the shards fly past them. Dura showing his insane level of strength, putting awe, respect, and probably a little bit of fear into the both boys. And notably, I have moments like this. As I've gotten older and stronger, I've also been put in a position where I've had to take care of my own, like, baby family members. Like I mentioned, many a time before, I'm in a weird spot relative to most of my bloodline, where, like, the next youngest cousin is, like, a decade older than me. The next youngest cousin is, like, a decade younger than me. So, like, I've been put in the same position that some of my cousins were put in before, where they had to take care of me. I had to take care of some of my own younger family members. And there are many times where they didn't respect or listen to me until I did some absurd feat of strength either to them or in their general vicinity. And by to them, I mean lift them up. I don't hit kids. It's not a thing that I do. I just don't think it's fine or good or anything. They'd be like, Pencil, haven't you been mentioning that you were beating this kid? Yes. I still don't really care though. But regardless, it's not my kid. I'm not hitting them. But it would be like, sometimes I just pick them up and be like, stop it. And then they'd stop. But I still remember in a scenario just like this, there were times where I would just do something and then immediately they'd start listening, right? Like, I remember one of my baby cousins, they wouldn't listen, but they were like just a little bit rowdy. So I didn't really care all too much. But they dropped something underneath the couch. Or it wasn't a couch. The reason I was able to do it, especially that was before I started working out. I was luckily enough, I'd been naturally strong. But they dropped it under one of the chairs, and they couldn't reach it. So I was like, hold on a second. I just scooped up the chair and stood up. I essentially squatted and lifted the chair up. They looked at me in shock and awe for a few seconds. I was like, pick up the thing. This thing's heavy. And they picked up the thing, and then they listened perfectly ever since. And notably, that was literal years. That was like a decade ago. They still tell me about that. They're like, I still remember when you lifted that chair up. And I'm like, you could probably do that now too, little one. And they aren't even little anymore. That was 10 years ago. But still, it is sometimes these moments like these which will really inspire kids to listen. So, I do understand it. It wasn't even just, Dura brutalizing them. It was just Dura showing, hey, yeah, I'm this much stronger than you. And then the kids, who clearly do respect strength to some degree, are like, huh? And it seems like that is just like a universal thing. But with it being the case, we see that Maru and Cross look on in genuine shock. And we see that Dura, who wasn't really impressed by this, turns around and is like, huh, what is it? As both Maru and Cross look completely amazed. And notably, I do love the difference in expression between these two and the slight differences between the twins. You can see that Maru is just like genuine straight amazement. You can tell by the softness and the curve of his eyebrows here. Meanwhile, Cross is like, Maru's just straight awe. Meanwhile, Cross is like, I want to be able to do that too. You can tell by how like his eyebrows are drawn shorter and focused in on here. Very, very nice. And notably, ever since they listened to their adopted father. And we see that ultimately Maru asks a very simple question. hey, Dura, why are you building some dumb old canal? And we see that Dura admits, you think it's dumb, huh? Well, I guess a kid like you wouldn't understand. You see, if you use a boat to transport goods from Deskunte to Shama, you gotta take a route like this. Whoa, that's a crazy detour. Exactly. That's why I'm building a canal through here. Ah, now I get it. But why? Oh, wait, no. As Maru says, now I get it. Cross asks, but why? And Maru actually goes, Cross? You did see what he did to that boulder, right? Do you want him to do that to us? Why are you asking questions? And we get some lore, some history on the Sumerians and their people and their intertwining cultures. Or, in this case, lack of intertwining cultures. We see that Cross asks, why should we Romulians help do, or, I'm see, is it Romulians? No, it can't be Romulians. It can't be Romulians. It should be Rumelians, because there's an E. Why should we Rumelians do anything that benefits Deskunte? We see that Dura answers as in, the canal was planned to be built here long ago, but Calons? We get some info on the Calons. And now this is interesting. Notably, there are two ways this could go. They could be naturally occurring creatures, or, if you'll notice, the shapes of some of these beasts, from seemingly rabbits to a tiger to what may be a wolf, and I'm not sure what this would be, and definitely not this. Does this design scope sort of remind you of anything? A certain curse technique that had someone receive a few fraud allegations. Certain curse technique that had certain people being called potential men. Essentially from the designs of these creatures and how intertwined they seem to be with the Rumelians? Rumelians. Yeah, the Rumelians and their, like, dots and design detail. I do kind of want to believe that the Calons are actually like a permanent curse technique or some application of it. Very akin to the Ten Shadows, right? Notably, we saw that Maru saw Marmalade Boy's Takada's like mother doll thing as a Calon. And it was called a Shikigami, a guardian spirit. So I wonder if these were a guardian spirit of the Rumelians. And that is why they are described to do what they do. As when Cross says, Calons? There were beasts sacred to our people called Calons. But all the other tribes insisted that Calon should be destroyed. When we refused, we were driven out of our village, and our parents were killed. We understood why they were so insistent. It's because the Calons attacked and ate anyone who wasn't Rumelian. There we go. Yeah, Rumelian. But that seems oddly specific, right? Notably, the tribes are obviously the different types of Sumerians. Deskunte, Rumelians. Maybe there are people in Shama. That's the other port. We know that Shama is very specifically not a Deskunte territory because of what is brain, skull, tap, brain. We know it's not Deskunte territory because we'll reveal later on in the chapter that for 10 years there was no trade between Deskunte and the Rumelians. So there was a trade lock off there. So we've met at least, or we've heard of 3 separate tribes of Sumerians. Now, obviously they are all Sumerians though. They do all share the third eye, and also they share their markings, but there are at least some quote unquote major phenotypical differences. Is phenotypical the right word there? Hold on, let me double check. Phenotypic. Relating to the observable characteristics of an individual resulting from its interaction of a genotype within the environment. Okay. Phenotypical, adjective used to describe observable physical characteristics of an organism resulting in interaction with genetic makeup in the environment. Okay. Essentially, phenotypical may not be the right word. Essentially, visual appearances, right? The Rumelians all have the third eye, the markings they eventually develop. Because you'll note that both Maru and Cross at this point do not have their markings just yet, and we will see them have their markings later on in this chapter, while they're seemingly still around this age. So, Rumelian markings at least do not immediately spawn in from birth or anything like that, and they do vary. But the tribes were all communicating, and the Calons see, that's the thing. There were sacred beasts to our people called Calons, which does imply that they were naturally occurring, but I don't know why they would only spare Rumelians. That seems like a weird point if it wasn't someone intentionally coding them to be that way, because unless all the other Sumerian, like, oh, we're going down it. Okay, so I'm going to slightly spoil Molly because I feel like this is the best comparison I have to it. But I'm going to slightly spoil Magi. Because you'll notice that the difference between the Rumelians and the Deskunte is very specifically the hordes, which does imply that Dabura, the Sumerian king, quote unquote, that we saw on the ship, is of Deskunte, right? Because notably we see a whole bunch of Rumelians here. They're all the ones working in the camp or working on the canal with Dura. Eventually we'll get to the spot point soon, I promise. But the main thing I want to point out, they have horns. The Rumelians don't. We also know that Dura has pointed ears. We don't know why. So I do wonder if all of them have those major biological differences. Because, like, we as humans, despite all having our unique differences and quote-unquote races, are still all humans, right? Like you cut open a human, we're all going to bleed red. All human teeth are human teeth. You can take a kidney from from someone who's Spanish, and as long as their blood type matches someone who's African American, boom, the kidney's going to work just fine because our bodies all function internally. The only reason we have these aesthetic differences is because of like our environments. Our phenotypical differences typically come from environmental differences, right? So like the reason people people closer to the equator have darker skin tones is because darker skin tones better react to the increased amount of sunlight. The reason people who are from the north typically don't, or farther from the equator who have less sunlight, have lighter skin tones, is because they don't develop enough they never developed enough melanin, and thus they do not have the same levels of it, and then they are not as exposed to sun, but they have different resistances, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all human. That's the kind of the core thing. I wonder if it is the same thing for the Sumerians and their different tribes. And the reason I wonder that is because of the horns being such a massive difference, right? If there were humans that also had massive like bone protrusions out of their head, which would be these horns, I think that would technically be different enough to count as a subspecies. Maybe because like there's no, like, I can't think of a single like massive human difference across quote unquote races, because races are, at least for humans, are like a social construct. They aren't real. Like they're real, like just as in ethnicities are also real, but like you're still a human. The only subspecies of human that I think we do know of that existed once alongside Homo sapiens sapiens was like Neanderthals, and there are some people who still have Neanderthal DNA, but like they were the only subspecies that have like enough visible serious differences and like actual biological differences that they could be classified as a subspecies of human. But in the end, we're all human. Just because I have darker skin than somebody else doesn't make me any more human or me any less human than another person who doesn't have the same amount of melanin that I do, right? But like, if these are naturally occurring beasts and not specifically something created by Rumelian through their application of their curse technique, I don't know why they would only consume Rumelians, or why would they be able to tell the difference? Unless there are massive phenotypical differences. Like the people of Deskunte have the massive horns, and maybe another tribe has spikes that come out of their shoulders or something like or their elbows. Like, I don't know. I do want to see more of the Sumerians and the different tribes, because it is interesting that the Calons are able to distinctly tell the difference between Rumelians, the Deskunte people, and possibly the people of Shama, and they attack anyone and eat anyone, very specifically, that isn't Rumelian. I do really want to believe, though, that this is something that was set up specifically by a previous Rumelian. Right, like that's what I want to believe. I want to believe that the Calons were created, and then maybe they were a binding vow that was set up to consistently protect the Rumelian people. But of course, the Rumelian people were outcasted and forced here, as we do find out that. Let me go here. As Dura says, this whole place is the Calons' habitat. Back when the canal was in its planning stages, the workers from Deskunte were attacked, and the construction came to a halt. So it's not that we have to do it; we're the only ones who can do it. That's not an answer. Deskunte drove us here in the first place. So the government is the tribes, right? Obviously, the each of the tribes presumably have a representative, and they all come together. And the reason that Maru and Cross lost their homes and their parents were slain is because their tribe and their people, the Rumelians, were fine with the Calons. They were considered sacred beasts, sacred to our land, sacred to our people, called Calons. So they didn't want to destroy a natural part of their history or a natural part of their culture. They didn't want to override or give that up, and thus they were slain for it. Would you look at that? People of a certain land being slain by people of another land over their beliefs. Does this allegory sound familiar to people? People coming to an area and forcing another group of people in that area to a smaller area. As we find here, that's not an answer. Disconte drove us here in the first place. They forced us here to this barren land where barely any crops can grow. So I'm asking, why the heck should we work for Disconte? I'm shocked they have the word H, but that may just be a loose translation. Once again, we don't know how much of Samorian, like, this is obviously all being translated for us, so I'm not sure what their H equivalent is. But, hey, would you look at that? A subsection group of people who aren't necessarily that different from the other rest of their species being forced to a specific place that has horrible living conditions, and they're forced to live and scavenge off this land specifically after they're kicked out of their original land, which is then taken over by another group of that same species. I wonder what this could be an allegory for. I wonder. Can I just say it? I mean, I feel like it should be obvious. And notably, this works for whether you think it's an allegory for the Western world or the Eastern world. The people, at least from my understanding, the people who run Japan now weren't actually from Japan. Like, the actual native people of Japan were trampled over. Just as the people from America that now run America aren't actually from America. And they kind of just came in and trampled and took everything over and then forced the people who were there into a small, desolate land. And then got mad at them anyway and then took that over too. Or keep taking from that. Yeah, the allegory is pretty clear here. And notably, even the idea of the sacred beasts here that need to be slain en masse, overriding the sacred culture and beliefs of these people, all for the sake of others who simply could just avoid that or just not engage with them or just be wary of them. Does that also sound familiar? Destroying the natural habitat of people and then overriding it for the benefits of oneself or one's own group? Why does this all sound so familiar? Let's not play these games. You all know what this is an allegory for. I'm just scared. But we see that ultimately Dura says, it's not for Disconte. It's for us Rumelians. And once again, Dura implying that he's a Rumelian. Why he has pointed ears, though, I don't know. But then again, it could just be a unique trait. Like, these things happen. Like, relatively speaking, I have actually small ears. Like, my dad's ears and my mom's ears are larger than mine. So, like, it could just be, like, a thing. And, like, my ear shapes can be different, too. Like, notably, my ears don't do, like, the fold-in thing. Like, if you'll notice, my ears are just round. Like, I think I have, like, the most generic shape for ears. But there are people whose ears, like, they either fold in, like, I literally can't press it. I know it's all cartilage, but, like, I can't press, like, there are some people whose ears do, like, the butterfly thing, where they, like, press in here and that, so it could just be, his ears are pointed, either as, like, a cultural thing, like, you can clip your ears that way, like, hypothetically, if you were to take my ear and just slice off this part, my ears would also be pointed, or it could just be a unique biogenetic trait. But, notably, Dura, regardless of whether or not he's uniquely Rumelian or not, he is Rumelian. There we go, Rumelian, not Romulian. I keep saying Romulian, but Rumelian. He points out that he is, and also, though it may be hard to grasp, in this country, though it may be hard to grasp, in this country, where only those who are strong tend to gain power. So, these tribes all share one singular country, which does imply that the world is even bigger, right? Like, notably, the planet that they came from was massive, and they only exist in one country. And yet, there's still conflict between people within that country. They all have different tribes and beliefs. I wonder what this is all an allegory for. But what we do see, and no, it's not even really an allegory, because Samorians are just another intelligent species. They're just another type of humans, essentially. Or at least they live like humans. And we'll even see that. And there's one thing I do wonder that's based on the material conditions of this chapter that will make me wonder about later on. But we'll see that Dura says, even if they hurt us, we can't hurt them back. Because if Rumel doesn't change, Disconte never will. In order for people with no shared land or blood ties to truly coexist peacefully, we need to have universal love and time. So, this is a belief, and I do see where Dura is coming from in this way, right? Even if they hurt us, we can't. It is a beautiful message. It is a beautiful idea, and I think that's the thing. Like, notably, it's so weird, and funnily enough, let me go to the poll right now. There is something I do want to take a look in a book. For some reason, my polls weren't working. I don't know what it is. I scheduled a whole bunch of them, and then I checked. They went live, but they didn't, like, actually go live for some reason. I don't know. I love it when YouTube just decides to not work for me. But I ran a poll for the last chapter. Jujutsu Kaisen fans, let me know. Would you trample over another to save your own life? And a lot of y'all ended up agreeing with Cross and said, I will do what I must to survive. Out of 293 votes, 71% said, I will do what I must to survive, while only 29% said, I could not take what others have. So, this is it. This is also, once again, an extrapolation on that question. Is it okay for other people to take from you and to trample over you as long as you don't want conflict with them? I think, like, I never. This is the thing, I don't want to fall too deep into it because this is not the channel for that. But I've never been the biggest fan of the idea that it's okay as that you get bullied as long as you don't bully back, or like I don't like. I guess the main idea is I don't want to work with people who don't even see me as human, right? Or who see me as lesser. We're all people. I don't think it's right for me to be forced to work with people who don't even see me as people, right? And it's fine if they don't want to change their ways on that, but I don't have to or want to work with them. But in this case, Dura is pushing a more like accepting mindset, right? Where he's just like, we need to work with them, we need to coexist with them, even if they've done this horrific thing to us. We cannot try to do horrific things back, because that will only halt progress. And in a way, that's true. But notably, I think a lot in human history, the most progress has only been made through conflict anyway. And I don't think the Sumerians are going to end up much different, at least based on how this chapter ends. But we see that Cross asks, coexist peacefully? And Dura says, it means we should be good neighbors, which is why the neighbor statement stuck so much to Cross and to Maru as an idea. And Dura is where they got it from. It means we should be good neighbors. It's easier to accept the differences. It's easier to accept people's differences when you have something that connects you. And this canal is going to be our connection with this Kuntai. So, once again, building bridges, building connection. And I think that is important, right? Ultimately, as much as I would love to be like, I would love my own beliefs to be like universal. The idea of like, hey, we're all humans. It's cool that we're all humans. Why don't we just all be human together and not hate each other for stupid reasons? But like, hey, people get othered all the time, even when they're quote unquote the same as everybody else, right? Like I've seen a lot of people say, well, maybe if everyone just looked the same, people wouldn't hate each other. There are people who get mad at you for having a certain nose size, the way your eyes look, your ears, for some reason, there's always some way for people to get mad or be like, oh, I'm better at you because of this, that, and the third thing. It's so whack. It's so random. It is just a thing anyway. So I do think I understand what Dura means in the idea. Like ultimately, you're gonna want to connect somehow, right? Like you want to build a connection, and ultimately, the cycle of violence is an eternal cycle, right? Like ultimately, if you keep enacting violence, or if you keep enacting hurt when people hurt you, you're just gonna continue a cycle of hurt over and over and over again. And that is true. That is true. And that's a story that like, the cycle of hatred from Naruto is all about. Full Metal Alchemist has that as well. The Avatar: The Last Airbender. Once again, it's a matter of like a never-ending cycle of violence, and that's why I want to believe in that more. It's like, is that possible for humans to completely give up a cycle of hatred, a cycle of violence? I want to believe it is, but man, it's getting harder and harder to tell. But with it being the case, we see that Dora admits. Plus, once the canal's finished, I'm going to run water from the Rumel River out to the camps and villages. I can use the canal as an outlet to build larger intake without worrying about flooding. It won't just make the land fertile either. Once we have a steady supply of clean water, I'm sure the kids won't get sick all the time anymore. Yeah, so this is the idea that while this is foundationally acting as a connection between Deskunte and Rumel, in order to repair the relationship between those two that happened over the disagreements over the Calyon, it is also still meant to better the material conditions of the Rumelians themselves. Because ultimately they are still suffering, right? They are still the people who were hurt by Deskunte and presumably the other tribes and their choice to outcast them to this very poor land, right? Like they still are the losers in this scenario. Dora is just making the best of a bad situation and trying to work around it, hopefully to better the situation in the long run, which I do think is very, very good and very, very important. But we see that ultimately Cross is like, I just don't understand it. And he simply cannot completely comply with Dura's ideals or beliefs here, and will end up going off on his own. And we see later on that both Dura and Maru are now just working alone. And Maru even says, I wonder if Cross isn't going to show up again today. And ultimately, we see that with a yawn, Dura admits, it's not that Cross's way of thinking is wrong.
That's the majority opinion. Most people feel the same way. That's the reason I'm doing this all on my own.
So ultimately, Dura himself is trying to rally against the consistent current Rumelian sentiment and trying to rebuild connections between Deskunte in spite of the bad blood between the two. Which does make Dura like the right good man. Like he's a good man with good ideals, even if his blind idealism is going to seemingly cost him eventually, right? I think there's a reason we do not see Dura by the time of the modern day. And it's not going to be a pleasant one. But of course, we see that Cross, he's here. He's just not helping, at least for right now. In fact, he sees what happened here. As Maru goes, look! Those are all the rocks we dug up yesterday! And the cages are all broken! So, people did come overnight, presumably, and completely step back their progress. And we see even Cross himself is shocked and disgusted at this. And Dura says, that's... But, just... And I do love this for Maru. Maru clearly cares about the perception of his brother and how he's meant to be treated and everything. He doesn't want Cross to get in any trouble, as he immediately says, it wasn't Cross! Cross would never do something like this!
And Dura says, I know that. There's a surprising number of people who don't agree with what I'm doing out here. I'm sure it was just some punks from camp who bought into some weird ideas. Let's hurry up and get back to work.
The idea that Dura... See, like, that's the thing. Dura's such a good man. See, I want to believe in Dura so badly. And I do. It's just like, man, it's rough. And that's the thing, I don't believe in violence either. So I guess I more so do align with Dura, where I don't believe that hurting people is ever, like, a good thing. I believe communication is the core for everything, but I do also understand why people are like, that is a foolish dream when violence is the universal language. It is, it's a rough thing. It's a difficult line to toe. It's a difficult dance to do. But, with that being the case, Dura's determination and willingness to move forward against all setbacks, and very specifically not even getting mad or seeking revenge, because as Maru asked, but what about the people who did this?
Dura says, it'd just be a waste of time.
He's so focused on just getting his ideas out there, getting his ideas done, and moving forward regardless of whatever setback are caused by others. And I do think that is a good mindset to have, right? Ultimately, I think a lot of times in life, because we live in a society, a lot of the times you do kind of just gotta yell, we ball. Like if you have an idea, you have a dream, especially a dream that doesn't, like, hurt anybody, especially if it's a dream that's meant to help people, but other people just don't like the idea of helping other people, you gotta yell, we ball, and just push forward. I can think of many times in my own life where I've had setbacks, either accidental or purposeful, by other people. I'm like, I could take time and get extremely mad at you and chew you out. Or I could just remake the presentation you deleted. I already made it. I already know what it's supposed to be like. In fact, I still have all the images saved. Congratulations, you deleted it off the drive. Boop. Whole thing's ready again in 5 minutes. I'm gonna go present now. And like, if anything, it is the success in the face of people trying to stop your success that is the most sweet and tasty catharsis ever. So I suppose, in a way, I still am vindictive. But like Dura, I don't believe in, like, just randomly attacking people. Or not even randomly, because obviously this wouldn't be random. This would be simply getting even with the people who have wronged you. But I do agree with Dura fully in the sense of, like, it's a waste of time. It's whatever, you know? We ball. You gotta keep balling. But with it being the case, we see Dura digging in his nose and say, just be a waste of time. And we cut back to the camp where everyone is staying at currently. Obviously, once again, many people lost their homes in presumably the initial Deskunte and possible unified tribe attack against the Rumelians to push them out of their original territory, off their original lands, in this tight area, so they only have the camp. And we see that other Rumelians are kind of not too happy, as Dura predicted with Dura's actions. As they say, watching him trying to suck up to Deskunte makes me sick. There are rumors that Deskunte is paying Dura off. Well, I bet he learned his lesson now. You think he's the type to give up that easy? He'll keep on building that canal. Then what are we gonna do about it? Bury it again. It's easier for us to destroy it than it is for him to build it. But Dura's a fool, so he doesn't understand that. And that is true. Like, it is very true to form, right? And that's the thing. I've seen a lot of people critique Gege's writing, but man, Gege do no ball, right? Because there are people out there like this who will stop any form of progress just because they can. And it's essentially, it's their own way of issuing some sort of control when they have very little of it. I've always taken bullying or the looking down on, or especially like mistreatment of others, especially others who are doing no wrong, right? Like that, especially those who are doing no wrong to anybody. I just view that as you being weak and being unable to cope with that, so you take that anger out on other people. And it's never been, like, impressive to me. I don't know. And luckily enough, I've always been a big guy. Like, big. Like, even before I started working out, just big. I was a large dude. So I never necessarily had to worry about being bullied. So it was never something that happened to me. But whenever I heard about bullying, I was like, someone who's strong wouldn't do that. What's the point? Like, even in my young, like, super cognitively advanced self, I was like, I never got the idea of bullying. I remember, especially when cyberbullying started going around, when we got all those bullying seminars, I was like, huh, doesn't even seem like something feasible. Because one, it's not happening to me, and two, why would you do that if you were actually strong? Why would you, like, what do you gain of that, of making fun of or picking on the weak? Like, there's no fun in it. There's no value in it. But then again, I've always been a person who's been inspired more by challenge and, like, active engagement. So, like, I was just never a person to ever be a fan of bullying, because I was like, I just didn't get it. It would never be something that clicked for your boy. But in this case, it is these ideas that these guys lost everything, right? They lost what little control they had. They lost their original lands. They lost their original home. Now they're living in a camp. And they're seeing a person who's trying to rebuild connections, or even foster a connection with those same people who presumably forced them in this position in the first place. And in order to get their quote-unquote revenge against the people who wronged them, they're stopping any progress and would keep stopping any progress. But we see that ultimately, and once again, in a way that's very true to life, sometimes the way to stop those who are stopping progress is to stop them. As a certain someone walks in, Dura is pretty stupid.
Huh? Who's this kid?
Because it's faster to beat a lesson into losers like you than to reason with them.
Hey, you're one of the
And he immediately gets domed directly in the face. So, violence, clearly it ended up being the answer for at least these guys. Because notably, they don't end up stopping construction ever again. Mainly because Cross does come beat them up. But that does raise the question, right? Is violence sometimes the answer? If someone won't listen to reason, maybe you do. I like the idea of that, but, like, isn't it kind of true? Like, how deep do I go? We're 46 minutes in. I ain't no one. Well, people will get here, and I do appreciate those who do. I think every single atrocity in history wouldn't have been stopped with some sort of violence. Name any atrocity ever, and I'm talking either systemic atrocities or, like, literal wars. They wouldn't have ended without violence. I wouldn't have. Think of the institution of slavery. Any of its forms. Any of its versions. Do you think it would have ended without some sort of violence or rebellion? No. I don't think so. What? We're going to talk them down? No. Segregation? No. I think that needs some degree of some belief. That the idea that violence was there somewhat as an option, I think that was kind of needed. I think ultimately, any war ever out there, like American independence, for example, no violence, that was never going to happen. Any place is independent. Like, there's always some degree. And obviously, not everything needs to be resolved violence. There are many wars that are bloodless, or many conflicts that are bloodless, or many things that can be talked out. But in terms of, like, mass wiping change, I do understand this idea that violence is kind of the answer. And I see where Cross gets it from. And I like, once again, just looking at history, I can somewhat believe it, just based on human history. But part of me feels wrong about that, because I don't like violence. But I guess you don't gotta like something as long as you know it works. But that still feels so weird to say. But we see that Cross comes in and immediately buries his fist in. And then Cross is back. And Morris says, "Oh, Cross, you're back!" And then Cross says, "Don't get the wrong idea. I just didn't want you to think I was like them." And we see Cross is actually beat up because, you know, he did try in 3v1 there. And he left it with a few bruises and... He left it with a few bruises and a black eye. They did manage to get their licks in, but obviously no one came to interfere anymore. And we see that both Morrow and Cross did actually manage to fill up all the cages. And they even say, "Run up the cages to fill Dura." And Dura says, "Go ask Gramps how to weave more. He's better at it than me." I'm assuming Gramps isn't Jabaloma. It's probably the guy from the start of the chapter we don't see again for the rest of the chapter. And we see that Morrow asks, "Hey, why are we planting the trees here?" And Dura explains, "These trees are halophytes. They love salt. The cages will break eventually, but then the tree's roots can do the same job." So, that's interesting. I don't, like, they are flowing fresh water, I do believe. Like, I think the Rumel River is a freshwater river. So, like, I'm shocked that they're planting, like, halophytes. Or, I'm not, wait, let me make sure halophytes are even, like, a thing. I'm pretty sure they are. Halophytes? Halophyte, a plant that can grow in complete environment, high salt environments such as saline soils or coastal areas. Coastal areas in general. So I guess they still do need to boil the water that they're planning to run through, because since it was coming from a river, I thought it was fresh water. But no, the trees that they are planting are halophytes, because not only will that help lock the soil, but it'll prevent the water from overflowing and flooding, as that's one of their main concerns later on in the chapter. But of course, we see that Maru almost gets lost as Dura, the floodgates broke, and suddenly the water washes away, and everyone, including Maru. And obviously, even Dura's like, "Ah, Maru!" and has to go save him. But naturally, with all the progress that they're making, they eventually do get some degree of help. As Jabaloma, who is another Samurian we've seen before, one with a name, who I completely forgot that he got a name earlier, Jabaloma shows up and says,
"The Council of Elders has given their approval. The whole village will work together to continue the canal project. Canal project, as well as the plans to make full use of the Rumel River through the canal."
See, they say Rumel River, and I think of rivers as freshwater, but I suppose there are saltwater rivers. Actually, let me see, is that a thing? It could just be their planet. Or their saltwater rivers. I mean, coastal should just be, yeah, they're all saltwater rivers, but they are rare and often short. Okay, so there's a thing. So maybe they are tracking to the ocean. And it makes sense, right? Because, in fact, no, it makes sense. The Rumel River must be something unique, right? It must be like this or something, because rivers do lead to oceans. Because, like, this is clearly an ocean around there that they're building the canal through, and that's where the water's going to flow through. So that's why they need to use halophytes there, because it is the water. But Jabaloma reveals that they did actually manage to cook and get everyone on board with Dura's plan. And Maru's actually impressed and says, "Look at all the people." And you can see, Maru's, by this point in their growth cycle, the markings that will come to be permanent for Maru and Cross are finally developing here. It seems after this instant, as they got further into the future, their marks started coming. You can see the marks fading in on both of them. They are very faded, though, so I do wonder how that works biologically. Like, do they appear? I thought at first they were just cultural markings, but no, it seems like they are a literal part of their biology. Like, parts of them begin to hyperpigment, and then boom, they have the markings permanently. But we see that Dura is very, very happy and says, "Ha ha, Jabaloma, I knew you'd come through." Oh man, Dura, she's such a great, cool, amazing, handsome, strong character with a fantastic jawline and gorgeous hair. I hope nothing bad happens to him. And we see Jabaloma says,
"You never do things in the right order, you know that. Still, the council would have never done anything had you not started the work on it yourself, so don't go thanking me." Once again, this is Jabaloma, a character who we will see later on sort of be the emissary for the Sumerians. Essentially admit that, yeah, Dura putting in the work is what allowed this to even become a possibility, that the Rumelians would work together on a project that was once so controversial. It was his determination for the future and his willingness to move forward that brought everyone together. And we see that Cross even sees the man he had beat up before. And the words of Dura come to mind once again. To truly coexist peacefully, we need to have a universal love and time. And Cross comes over, bows in apology, and says, "Hey, Huh?
I'm sorry I punched you. Thanks for cooperating with us."
Yeah, same here.
So that is nice, right? Ultimately, they came to some sort of, not necessarily recollection, what's the word? Reconciliation. Where they understand, hey, we had our differences, we had our disagreements, but now that we are working together, now that we understand, now that we can make this progress together, there's no need for violence between us. We can move on, we can move forward. And notably, while the guy doesn't clearly accept the apology, he does turn away. It's clear that ultimately they do accept and forgive him. Like, they understand what it was all about, and they understand they were in the wrong, which I do appreciate. That's beautiful. If only real life worked like that, even without the violence part. But we see that Maru says, "Hey, Cross!" And then Cross says, "Maru, Dura, I understand now." And once again, you can see their markings starting to fully fade in, which is very, very nice. And a beautiful drawing here of young Cross. And we see that after this moment, it's clear that he's found some neighbors, right? He's found some people he's trusted and developed with. And Dura clearly recognizes this and laughs, going, as Maru is very confused and just goes, "Huh? Bro, what are you talking about?" And we see everyone working together, people moving away at the rocks. We see the guy who got punched starting to rebuild the cages that he had once destroyed. And all the cages are built, and the water begins to flow. And then the trees begin to grow, and time begins to pass. The children are able to play in the water, play in the probably redirected Rumel River, and everything just seems to be getting better. And as the canal is finally fully built, the Deskunte people travel through on a massive boat with oars. Does anyone else find it weird? Like, obviously, unless Maru and Cross are actually a lot older than we think, because it looks like they are in their pretty much current outfits by the time we see them of the modern narrative. I'm assuming one of the other tribes developed spaceships or something, because I'm shocked they still have boats that use oars and stuff like that. Unless a lot more of this is automated than we think, they're just like an aesthetic thing. It feels like they are not as like scientifically advanced as they would be to travel across the stars in the time period that would be, unless their time flows a lot faster or a lot slower. Like the time and the aesthetic doesn't seem to match this like intergalactic traveling species. I don't know. It is strange. But like I mentioned earlier, the Deskunte people are here. They travel through the canal as requested, and they have the massive difference of the horn. So I do wonder if any of the other tribes of Samarians have these massive differences. And notably, the massive differences are truly massive, as even within the Deskunte people, the horns are of all different sizes. We see Dura and his two adopted children, Cross and Maru, look on. Maru is smiling as Cross is glaring at the Deskunte people. Once again, Cross clearly holds a grudge, while Maru seems to be at least a bit more accepting. And we see the canal in all its glory, fully built, all the trees acting as a natural wall on top of the rock wall to essentially allow the canal to exist. And Cross looks on in shock and awe, as Maru looks on in joy and awe, and Dura just looks on with pride. A very beautiful shot of these three. Fantastic. And we see that Dura explains, "We received a request from Deskunte. They'd like to build a port facility halfway through along the canal where ships can dock and crews can rest." And we see some of the rebellions be like, "Huh, see? Now they're getting cocky." But Dura says, "What are you talking about? They're covering the cost and we'll make money." And actually, the guy who got punched away was like, "Huh? What are you talking about? It'll boost Romel's economy if the port gets busy." And then Cross says, "Jabaloma?" And we see Jabaloma is looking very wistful. And he looks down and says, "Does that mean..." "Yep, Romel and Deskunte will resume trade." So, well, I'll just read it first before I talk about it. "We lost our parents because of the isolationist policy Deskunte forced us into." I wonder what that's all for. The Jabaloma's daughter died because of it too. So Jabaloma was a father. He didn't seem to have any other kids, or at least not any kids that we meet, as his daughter died because of it too. But Cross admits, "But I never once saw him get angry or consumed by hatred. Even though I'm sure he still struggled with unbearable emotions, wondering why his daughter had to die. 10 long years. I respect Jabaloma for that." So, it is clear that it is possible that Jabaloma was the mentor for Dura, who mentored Cross, but Cross is able to look back to Jabaloma as a method of inspiration and stuff like that, to essentially move forward with the pain instead of being consumed by it. And we see that both Dura and Jabaloma are essentially deciding on the location for the port. And they say, "First, we need to decide on the location. There's got to be somewhere the canal can be expanded so the ships can dock without affecting the flood management." And Jabaloma says, "What about using this settling basin here?" And Dura says, "Isn't that too close to the mouth of the river? The water level would be an issue." And we see everyone is simply celebrating over the progress. Everyone brings out some, presumably what their equivalent to that drink is. And while Cross is clearly drinking directly from a cup, Cross is clearly drinking from a cup, Maru goes straight for the whole bottle and starts chugging it. We see both Dura and Jabaloma also like seemingly toasting and then chugging it. Well, at least Dura's likely chugging it. Meanwhile, Jabaloma is sipping it. And Cross says, "When you start from the very bottom, all you can do is crawl up. I thought things were finally starting to get changed for the better. But then, one day," obviously, we see that the three men are celebrating. Maru is celebrating. Cross looks slightly annoyed, but still probably a little bit happy. "But then, one day, a Calon mauled the daughter of a Deskunte chieftain to death." Black panel. Obvious point of conflict. The whole idea of that it was only the Romelians who could do it anyway because they were digging in Calon territory. It makes sense that this would happen eventually, but of course this presumably cut off any sort of progress that was being made. Led to open war again, and who knows what was the retaliation. Considering the Romelians were already forced into this territory by their belief or by the nature of the Calons and how they were being favored by them, I assume this only led to even worse conflict. But overall, a very W chapter. I love the characterization and history for Cross and Maru. I love Dura as a character. Obviously, I think he's gonna die. Let's not even sugarcoat it. Like a character this nice, this cool, this handsome, but we haven't seen him in the modern day. He's dead. Getting some backstory for Jabalomba is good too. I do like the character and his design. I like the many different designs of the Sumerian planet. I love the history and lore behind it, the nature of the Calons and the designs. Once again, everything's just good. Like Modulo's just been hitting, and it's been hitting over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm more and more excited to learn more and more and more about their history and their culture, and ultimately how this civilization that's still using boats and water and traveling like this somehow reached interstellar travel in presumably like less than 10 years. Oh no, I'm very intrigued. So overall, a W chapter. Let me hit it for the 2 times. If you meant always see this video, please do me a favor and leave father figure. Leave father figure in the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you do not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 no month to get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member to the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. So those perks include the 28-minute live reaction to this very chapter, ad-free variations of all my videos, your name at the end of every single video, and many other little things. Also, I do have a Ko-Fi link in the description. I'm sorry, I'm changing up the outro so much. I'm trying to slow down. Ko-Fi down below where you drop 5 beans to a short video, 200 beans to a long video, or any beans at all. Any support is always greatly appreciated. Now, I'd like to thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. There we go. This is Bag on the Pencil, writing off.
I'd like to give a thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Redwolf 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zera, Brandon Payne, J2MA, Guillaume, Bura Ura, Alex Kenny, Enzo, Swift Strike, Superflame Zero, Yuki Ally, Azo2404, Strikaman, Aso8, Grim, Straw, Twisted, Ollie, DeBoy, Corey Watson, Damon Brown, Magic, CCC, Official Popeyes, Ramondo Furen, Cray Panem, Seraphiel, Dino, Axis XC, Plant Crone, Pickle, Heath Nelson, and Hector Gonzalez. Then, I'd like to give a thank you to our line art tier patrons: A+A, Kevin Encarnacion, Dread Zoen, Sean, and Midnight Lord 21. Then, I'd like to give a thank you to our Ink tier members: King RTX and Shrimpo the 4th Shrimp 06. Then, I'd like to give a thank you to our digital art tier members: J Warrior and AZ Void. I'd like to give a final thank you to our colored art tier patrons: Walkie Munoz and Walkie Munoz.